All right, hello. You are in the best session, so congratulations on that. I'm Jon Galloway. I'm a PM on the DevDiv community team.
Hi, I'm Gaurav Seth. I'm a product manager on the Azure App Services team.
All right, so we're going to be talking about updating and modernizing your applications. I'll just get right into it. Let's start with talking about why. There's a lot of good reasons, of course, like just out of the box with just updating your application from, say, .NET 8 to .NET 10 or .NET Framework to modern .NET, your app gets faster without making any code changes. You get new security fixes, of course, new features. So I like to think of modernizing applications in two steps. One is it just gets faster and better without making any code changes, but you can make code changes if you want to, right? Of course, compliance and support. .NET Framework supported forever, so you don't have to do for that, but modern .NET, you get 2 or 3 years depending. So .NET 10 just shipped, that's a 3-year release. .NET 9 is a standard term support, that is 2 years. And so in .NET 8, 3 years, and .NET 7, you're out of luck, right? And then also community and ecosystem. Those are really big, important things. That means your NuGet packages, your libraries, your, the answers to your questions when you go out looking for them, that sort of thing. So we just released .NET 10 last week at .NET Conf. So it's out, it's officially released, and as with every release, I keep wondering how I keep thinking they're done now. They can't get any faster. And yet, this is crazy, 93% memory improvement in max working set. So they keep finding new amazing ways to make .NET faster. This includes things with optimizing to do things like better JIT AOT, better memory management, all kinds of just really advanced things. And so this happens every single release. Tons of amazing things in .NET. Now, partly, I'm bringing this up here to just remind you, like I was always reminded. Before I worked for Microsoft, I've been at Microsoft 15 years. I worked 10 years in industry before that. And I was always wanting the newest, best stuff, right? And I would always hear about, here's what's new. And then I would come back and I would say, hey, team, we're going to update our app. And they'd say, no. Because the server only gets updated for this and blah, blah, blah. And it's a 3-year support, blah, 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 right? So what is really great now is that you actually can update your applications faster. C# 14 also, just more good candy, right? So that is updating. Another thing is modernizing. So modernizing is we think of as kind of a separate thing. Modernizing is once your application is running on the newest bits, it's easier to take advantage of new patterns, including optimizing for the cloud. So that includes all sorts of things like decoupling so that you can offload parts of your application's functionality, right? You can scale up, you can reduce costs. People always kind of focus when they talk about scale, they think about scaling up, but scaling down is maybe more important, right? Because you want to be able to scale up to manage your load, but you don't want to be paying for those extra servers when you're not using them. So taking advantage of the cloud as well. I'm talking fast because we've got cool demos and I want to show them all. So we think about this for the overall kind of workflow, right? So first you think about your upgrade. You assess it. You figure out what needs to be done. You look at your code. You look at what needs to get fixed and what you'd like to update. And then you go through your upgrade process. And you do that again for Migrate. So with Migrate, you look through, you plan out, you say hey, we've got these things that are running on a local SQL server. We've got these things that we really would like to take advantage of a Redis cache or Azure storage, et cetera. So you look at those things, maybe offloading from your application workload into Azure Function, right? And save some money there and scale. And then you go ahead and you do that migration step. So all of these things take some time and effort to figure out and go through. Fortunately, we've got some great new tooling available for you. So these are the main project types that these are available in right now. This is the GitHub Copilot modernization. I always forget the whole name, but that's app modernization. So really kind of focus on ASP.NET Core. So this is your MVC, your Razor Pages, and Web API. Not web forms, although I do have a little bit at the end, because I know a lot of people have web forms apps. Anyone want to raise your hands? Who here is actively maintaining a web forms app? So right, so I'm going to talk about that a bit. Blazor, of course. Azure Functions. This is one thing that people don't think about, but moving to the isolated model of Azure Functions is kind of a pain in the neck, right? There are some big API changes, and so updating to the newest Azure Functions is also important. WPF and Windows Forms. We don't talk about this enough, but there's tons of Windows Forms applications out there just cranking along, helping you rent your car and pay your mortgage and all that stuff every single day, right? And upgrading a Windows Forms app is often a lot easier than some of these other web-based updates. The web has changed a lot. Actually, Windows Forms and WPF, this is a right-click modernize, and you can be done in an afternoon. You take advantage of a lot of new features. You can run side-by-side, so different app or .NET versions. You can use all the newest performance things, take advantage of new Windows features, et cetera, right? And then, of course, class libraries and console apps. So this is all the stuff in GitHub Copilot app modernization. Now, I'm going to go into a demo in a second. And this is one where I struggled with it because I have the app totally working in the before and after state on my computer. I've spent hours going through this, polishing it, perfecting the demo. It takes an hour. We don't have an hour, right? And we have a lot of other great stuff to show you. So I'm going to show you a video, and I'm going to talk about it. However, I'm going to be at the expert booth tomorrow morning. Love to talk through it with you. This is not a video that's like smoke and mirrors pretend. This is really an hour condensed down to about 5 minutes. So I'm going to play the video, and I'm going to talk through it. OK. So this is the MVC Music Store application. This is, let me see if it's playing. There it is. So the MVC Music Store, actually, I wrote this app. This was one of my first assignments when I joined Microsoft. It's MVC. This is Framework 4.8. This was actually originally written for MVC 3. So I put the code out on GitHub. We right-click, and we select Modernize. So this is available in the latest Visual Studio 2022 or 2026. So then it gives you some options here. It says, what would you like to do? So I'm going through, and it's figuring out what's available. Now, this is small print, and I want to be able to keep up. So first, we're going to say, hey, I want to go to .NET 10. I want to use this branch. So what's important about this modernization experience is it is a chat, and it's actually a good thing. Sometimes chats annoy me, but this is a really useful one because you make selections, it makes recommendations, but then you can type in and say, no, this is actually what I want to do, OK? Now, it's going to go through and, first of all, analyze your application and generate a plan. This plan is in Markdown format, and this is editable. So you can go through, you can read it, and you can make changes to it. So this is something where we're doing this in the course of a couple of minutes, but you may want to take a few weeks with this. You want to discuss it with your plan. You could check this Markdown document into your repo, and this is like an artifact that you're going to work through. So for instance, here we can say, like, hey, I want to make sure that we're upgrading my Entity Framework application. I want to make sure that my company has some specific standards about NuGet packages. We always use this specific DI library, or we always use this for logging, right? So this is where you would go in and put this in there. All right? So now we've created this plan. This is really important pretty much for any productive AI long-running workflow, is to create a plan. And then you can go through, and if it gets stuck, or if you need to go home for the night, you can hit stop, and you can say resume. You come back in the morning and say resume. So here it's going through. We've got a dashboard, and you can see it's checking things off down the list. This workflow is based on Git. So it's along the way, it's working in a branch and making commits as it goes. So this is great because it's not like destructive or like, you shouldn't worry about it like messing up your existing application. So we understand this is something where, whoa, that's a little neat, okay. So you're going to go through and you will along the way, it'll hit issues. Now you could click investigate on them if you want to individually, or you can just say like continue. That's one thing with GitHub Copilot is it's going to sometimes it'll exhaust the number of requests that it'll do automatically, okay? And I'll just keep talking. So then you can go through and you can just say continue. The first time we run this, it's going to hit an issue. What's great is because we're in Copilot, we can go back to it and we can say, hey, this is the exact error. I highly recommend copy and paste errors into Copilot. And you can also say things like, look at the terminal, check my Git status. Like you can tell it to pull in context and give it those hints, and it'll go through and fix those. So this is the entire upgrade complete. And like I said, this is about an hour. Now, I do have demos where I've gone through and, okay. So now we can also, let's talk through that, we can migrate to Azure as well. So here we say migrate to Azure. The way that this UI works is you'll click on things and it'll actually just fill that into the chat. So that gives you the opportunity to type more in if you want, but sometimes I'll get stuck going like, what's it doing? And it's waiting for me to click submit. So again, it creates that plan. All right, it creates that plan. And then you can go through and you can just go through and click on different tasks as you go. Is it flashing for everybody or just me? Yeah. Okay, all right. So again, same sort of thing. You got a progress tracker. The progress tracker is really useful for being able to, like, you can share status with the team. You can use this as, you can say, like, generate me a summary with emoji bullet points, all that sort of stuff, right? So it's good to have not just a chat, but you've actually got an artifact that you can work with. So this is what I was talking about earlier, where we do that upgrade and migrate as kind of as two steps. You can, you don't necessarily have to always be on the newest thing, but usually we're finding that migrating is going to be, the best experience is going to be if you're on the newest bits. So, and I think we're close to the end of that slide. And so I'm going to switch over to my demo machine here. So here I've got that MVC music store, and I'll just show you the general kind of feel of that. So I do right-click, modernize. So here it's showing these, these different things that I can do. So I can say, I can upgrade, I can migrate, or I can do something like I can explore different modernization options, right? So here I'm going to say explore those. Now again, this is the thing where it popped it into the chat, but it's waiting for me to click send. I'm using Claude Sonnet 4.5. I bounce around between the different models. I find that GPT-5 is smart but surly. Like it just like, yeah, here's your answer, but it's like kind of doesn't do the work sometimes, and I have to keep telling it to do things, Claude 4.5 is like really wants to please you and works hard. So anyhow, it's off doing the things, it's analyzing, and it's going to come back with here's some modernization scenarios. Obviously, moving to modern.NET, but then it's also going to tell me some other things that I could do, like what about security, right? And so it can go through and it'll analyze the different security things. So this is kind of the best of two things put together. This is the generic GitHub Copilot, which is built into Visual Studio. I'm using 2026, which is just out, but also available in 2022. But it also, because it's built into this modernization experience, it's able to kind of dig in and has some additional smarts about updating an application for me. All right? So that is that, and then that's the general experience there. All right, moving on. I literally spent hours last night because my initial MVC app wasn't running, the framework one, and it was because of something with like an Antler binary dependency, blah, blah, blah. It was cached. Really frustrating, and then I'm not going to show you, but I just want you to know I worked hard for you. It was very frustrating. But it did remind me one of the amazing reasons to move off of older code to newer code is older code is a pain in the neck, and newer code seems to work better for me. OK, so let's look at, so that was MVC. Now I want to talk about WinForms. I'm going to pop right back over to this machine. And let's look at a WinForms app. Now, this one's kind of a fun one. What I did here is I took an MSDN magazine sample from 2008. It says 2009 because that's when this code was checked in, but this is 2008 code. This is a very simple sample. So I'm going to go through it. I'm going to show you again like the start and end because I don't have time to do all the amazing stuff, but I'm going to go through and do, I'll say modernize. Now normally, what's happening there? It's working on it, OK. Upgrade to a newer version. Sometimes it's not aware, so I'm going to say, and make it .NET 10. Because otherwise it'll always recommend it. Sometimes, because the models don't know what the newer one is out yet. So it's going to go through and modernize. Part of the reason that I did this is to show that I'm taking code that's coming up on 20 years old, and I'm going to make use of Microsoft extensions for AI. So let's say I've got an old app, and I want to add some AI into it. Well, this is literally going through Northwind database code, and it's a data grid in a web form, right, or a WinForm. So I can go through here, and I'll just say continue, and it's going to upgrade. Now, what this does is a few things for me. One is the obvious thing where it bumps the version number. But two, what's really nice is it actually handles some things like the SQL client API is actually changed. So it requires a different NuGet package, requires some code changes in here. When I first did this using the previous Modernize experience, it did bump the version number for me, but then I spent, I don't know, an hour figuring out what was going on with the error messages. So this is able to go through, figure that out, and actually determines, OK, there's my system data SQL client. That's going to need a change. And it goes through and figures that out. So I'm going to stop this, and I'm going to bump ahead to, maybe I blew this up. I think, oh, here it is, AI queries. OK, I should have rolled that back, so I'm causing all kinds of problems. OK, I think I can go through. I've got my AI queries, and I'll run it. And what I've got here is a WinForm application, and I've added in a dropdown, and it's calling into a large language model backend, and it is generating SQL for me. So this is a standard going through and just listing out orders. All right. I wanted to be able to do some other things. So I said, show me top 5 employees by total sales revenue in 1998, because that's how old the code is. So it's using Microsoft extensions for AI. This is all like the latest, greatest. This library was just released, like a week ago. So it's going through generating SQL for me, and then it's doing this advanced query. So I kind of want to make you think about hey, this is a fun one. Find employees with declining monthly average sales from 97 to 98. OK, Stephen, you better get on it. So the idea here is, why would you upgrade a WinForms app? Because you can take advantage of newer libraries and newer features, right? This was something I literally vibe coded in a couple of hours. This was not a big deal to do. This is one where I actually, again, given some more time, I would go through and do this live for you. It's not super hard to do, right? So that is fun thing number 2. But now let's talk about WebForms, all right? So WebForms is not directly supported in the GitHub Copilot modernization tool. However, GitHub Copilot does a pretty good job, and there's a great pattern for this, and it's called the Strangler Fig pattern. So Strangler Fig pattern, the idea is that you basically wrap your existing application with something that does nothing. It just kind of wraps around it. And the idea here, this is a pattern, Martin Fowler originally wrote this up. And the idea is this fig that strangles other trees or something. I don't know, it sounds exciting. But it strangles the other tree, and the tree on the inside actually dies, and it's replaced by this other tree, this new growth, right? And so the idea here is you're wrapping your existing older application with a newer app that does nothing, and then you're slowly using a unit of work. So your unit of work is a route, and it's just basically a URL. So if that's your orders product page, if that's your home page, whatever, you replace one page at a time. And that works for, of course, APIs, and it works for MVC, but it also works for a web form. Okay? You can replace, because a web form is just a URL, and you can replace one web form page at a time. So that's the general idea. What's neat is we're able to use this thing called YARP to make that possible. So here we've got our initial application with everything going into our ASP.NET Core app. We're going to set up the shell application in front of it that's just proxying everything to the ASP.NET Core app. So we've got the ASP.NET Core app that does nothing, and we have our framework app that's still handling all the requests. So it's just proxying everything through. The reason we do that is now we can start to migrate one page, one URL at a time out of that ASP.NET app into our ASP.NET Core application. And the reason for this is your migration could take a day, a week, a month, a year, right? It could take a while. In the real world, it takes a while. And you can do a few things. You can migrate things, or you can just add new functionality. You can say all new pages are Blazor pages in our new ASP.NET Core app. All the old pages, they still work, right? And this is a pattern that we've done successfully inside of Microsoft, and we've also had some large customers that have done this as well. So I will show you a quick demo. This is a fun one. This is actually something that I've done this pattern before, but I did this morning in my hotel room. So I took an application and I said, I first created that plan. Remember, these plans are really important with AI. Having a successful, bigger, not just hey, change this thing, do this thing, but you want to migrate an entire application, start with a document that's going to spell out your plan. You review that document. So here I said, here's what I want to do. I had it write the document for me. And so we go through and we say, OK, this is going to be in .NET 10. This is my, I like to give strict instructions. Don't create .NET projects by creating the files. Use the .NET CLI always, that sort of thing. But the big idea here, we talked about this pattern, right, with this YARP proxy. And so that's in my documentation. And it goes through and it creates that. So this was over a matter of, while I'm eating breakfast and getting a shower, it's going through and it's creating this Blazor application for me. So now I'm going to run this. And this is from this comes out of a sample right here, this eShop Modernizing. And some of this code goes back 6-8 years, right? So that's my web form app. It's working, but I want to start adding new pages in it using Blazor. So I've got this new ASP.NET Core, this Blazor app on the front end, and it's proxying everything back to the web form. Okay, so we're going to see it come up. Now, it's actually launched 2 windows. There's on port 5001 is the old app. On port 5000 is the new app. See, it's got to take a second to start up. There it is. So there's my web form. Everything here just continues to work. So if I click on create new, all that stuff, this existing functionality works. But I've now got a few pages I've added in here for that are in Blazor. So obviously I could do a little work and match up the CSS, et cetera. But this is so let's say we want a new counter page added to our existing web form app, and we want that in Blazor, we could do it, right? So this is the pattern that I recommend doing. And the general idea, what I was talking through, start with a documented plan and work through it and use that strangler fig pattern. All right. So I showed a little bit about the Migrate to Azure. It's the same sort of experience. You're generating the plan, and you're telling it to go through. So the general kind of steps there. As far as why you would do it, right? So we talked about, all the scale and all that sort of stuff. Also, things like automatic build, deployment, those sorts of things. Taking advantage, and these are the main scenarios that we look at, things all across from like blob storage, file storage, service bus, et cetera. Right? So you do the exact same things. You right-click, you create a plan in Markdown format, then you get these different tasks, and you say, go do this one, go do this one. Now, I don't have time to do a full demo. Fortunately, we have a great walkthrough. This was published on the .NET blog today. So this walks through all these steps, shows you exactly how to do that. It's also, of course, in the docs, but I totally recommend this. So Mika wrote this up and explains everything about how to do that. Now, I'm happy to see everyone taking pictures here. This works great for a lot of scenarios, what I was just showing you. Updating your application, modernizing your application. It doesn't work in all scenarios. You're going to hit cases where your application relies on something like, say, registry access or some other older pattern or something you're not able to work with. Fortunately, we've got a great solution for that. I'm going to turn it over to Gaurav to talk to you about that.
Thanks, Jon. So before I introduce Managed Instance on App Service, and we are announcing a public preview for that as of today, I just want to quickly talk about some of the modernization challenges that you may come across, especially when we talk about app service. Your application has dependencies. You need some COM components, you need an installer, but you couldn't do that today on Azure App Service for Windows because of the sandbox model that we use. You need an access to, let's say, a G colon or a H colon or a D or maybe a Z colon drive. You couldn't do that. Your application uses the in-proc session state. Or maybe you need special configuration like Jon mentioned. You have a dependency on registry. What do? That's where today we are announcing the public preview of Managed Instance on Azure App Service. It helps you accelerate of the journey of your web application over to Azure App Service. It helps you preserve window dependencies. So again, as I said, if you have an installer or you need a COM component to be installed, you can do that with managed instances on App Service. And of course, because you are eventually migrating to App Service, it helps you unlock scalability. We still take care of the patching. And beyond that, it's only available. But yes, a very important point to note here is that this feature is available only on our PV4 SKU. With that, let me quickly get into the demo. Now, to create an app service plan for managed instance on Azure App Service, you need to go to Azure Marketplace. Just type managed instance. And now what you see a new marketplace image called as web app for managed instance. Click on create. Once I click on create, you will see this experience, which is very similar to what you already have for Azure App Service. You have the subscription. I'll go ahead and select a resource group. I'll give it a name. And the name that I'm giving right now is for your web app. And now we'll select a runtime. Now you will see that there are slightly lesser number of runtimes that's made available to you. So the idea here is that these are the runtimes which are installed out of the box on the underlying instance, which in this case is actually a child VM. But that doesn't stop you from getting your own runtime. So if you need any other runtime, you can do that using configuration scripts, and that's exactly what I'm going to show. So I'll select 4.8. Now again, because we are announcing the public preview today, we are only in these regions, but we'll be very fast adding more regions as time passes. Now again, as I said, Managed instance on app service is only available on PV4 and PMV4. You select instance, and if you want zone redundancy, you can do that. Now, next comes the option to upload a configuration script. Treat configuration script as a PowerShell script where you give us all the steps that you want executed once we boot up the underlying instance. And to do that, you select the storage account, you select the container, and then you give us the name of the zip file which has the installation or the configuration script and all the dependencies. Now, in this scenario, the drop-down is not loading the file names. The reason behind that is we are using managed identity for all communication between managed instance and all other Azure services, and the portal doesn't have access using the managed identity. So I'll just go ahead and type the name. And by the way, this is the storage account where I've already uploaded the zip file. Now I select an identity. Now, what's so different about this identity? You could always assign a managed identity to your web app. Now, what I am doing is I'm actually assigning a default managed identity for the plan. So this is the identity that it will use to go communicate with the storage account or to an Azure Key Vault, and I'll show you a demo of that a little bit later. I click on Next, because eventually we are just creating a web app part of this plan. So your code could still be in GitHub repos. And next is networking. Now, you could always enable VNet integration for your web app. Now we will let you enable VNet integration for the plan itself. So you really don't have to go integrate all the individual apps within the plan. You do that for the plan. All the apps are injected into the VNet. I'll say on. Select the virtual network. Then go ahead and select the subnet. Now remember, the subnet that you select should be delegated to server farms. And I now click Review and Create. Now what happens behind the scene once I click the Create button is we will boot up the instance, we'll download the installation script, we will unzip, and then we will go through the PowerShell script, we'll install all the MSI installers, and it's just not about installation. Your installation script could also be used to enable different Windows Server roles, maybe an SMTP server role. You could even get a Windows service, or you could even get an MSMQ client. So the idea is whatever dependencies or configuration dependencies that your app has, without making code changes to your app, you can just migrate and modernize your web application using managed instance. Now, in the interest of time, I've already created a plan, and this is exactly the same installation script I have used. So once you get to the plan, it's created. You see a new option called as configuration. Under configuration, you have general settings where you see the existing script that you provided at the time of creation. Now comes the concept of mounts. As I said a little bit earlier, maybe your app requires an access to h:logs or maybe k:\mountfs. And you don't have the source code handy, so you can't even make a change to your source code. What do? You just come to the mounts, click on New Storage Mount, give storage mount a name, and then we let you mount 3 types of storages. It could be an Azure file share. So if you want a persistent and a shared file share, go for Azure Files. Or if you have a file server maybe within Azure or in your data center, as long as it is accessible over the virtual network, you can even use a custom mount over UNC path. Or if you just want a temporary mount, you can do that as well using the local option. Next, you select the storage account where the file share is. You now select the file share. And now, to connect to the file share, what I need is a connection string. Now what we have done is, we have security as front and center of this entire offering. So the connection string is actually stored as a key vault secret. So what you do is, you now select the Azure Key Vault. And you now select the secret name. So that's the file share connection string. And finally, you provide the path or the drive letter that you need. So I will say maybe so what happens is, once I do this, there's a restart that happens behind the scene. You will actually see a 𝗦𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀 being mapped to this Azure file share for your web application to use. Obviously, I'm not going to create one right now because I already have. The next is registry keys. What if I let you create registry keys for your web app? Yes, you can absolutely do that. Click on Add. Give the path of the registry key. Now remember, this is the path that we will create the registry key within the Hive on the underlying instance. Similarly, you again select the key vault name. And why the key vault? Because the actual value of the registry is stored as a key vault secret. I can actually select the key vault secret. So maybe I have a database connection string as part of the registry. I can select the secret name. It could be a string or a D word. And finally, this is something that we are enabling for the very first time on App Service, the ability to do a secure RDP into the underlying instance using Azure Bastion. How you do that? You come to Bastion, provided you have a Bastion created within the same virtual network. And on this page, as you can see, allow remote desktop. So the idea here is, even though Bastion is configured, you may not want to enable RDP for this app service plan. You control that using this checkbox. Since I've done all of this, and now I do want to do a remote session into the instance, how do I do that? Head over to another new option called as instances. Now over here you see two options. First is restart. Now for any reason, if I need to restart this specific instance, just click on the restart button and it will go ahead and restart. Now when I say restart, it will actually re-image the underlying instance. It will again download the configuration script and run through all the steps. Let me go ahead and cancel that, and now I will click connect. And that's magic. Now you are actually initiating a secure session into the underlying instance, and that's the instance where your app is actually running. You can see I have a local temporary file share. I have 𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀 that is mapped to an Azure file share. 𝗻:, this is actually local, temporary. And if I want to see the installation logs of the configuration script, go to 𝐶:, install scripts, and that's there. If I want to see all the different adapter logs, basically all the mounts and the registry keys that I've created, just click on adapters. What if I just want to verify that my registry key got created? Use regedit. You can see if I go to software, if I go to dev shop, yes, it's created. What if I want to access the IS manager? Now, one important thing to understand here is, while I am showing how to do a secure RDP session into the instance, do remember, if you make a change from the RDP session, that's temporary. Meaning, if you were to restart, or if we patch the underlying instance and do a restart, any changes that you have made will be wiped off. So the only way you should make a persistent change to the underlying instance is using configuration scripts. Give us everything in an installation script, give us all the dependencies, upload it to a storage file, that's it. Across scale-outs, scale-ups, restart, we'll rerun all the steps every time. That's the only way of having durable changes. Please don't do changes with RDP. The idea behind RDP is just for validation or maybe quick troubleshooting. And while I just migrated a web app which had so many dependencies over to Azure App Service using managed instance, what I do want to point out is that eventually, once you have done all of these initial steps, what you get next is your standard app service experience. Now, this is the app that I've migrated. You have access to all the great features that App Service gives you. We still manage and patch the underlying instances or the runtime. You can scale out, you can scale up, you can do log analytics. So all the features that were there with Azure App Service do come with managed instance on Azure App Service as well. And just to give you a quick demo, this is the app I migrated. It just works. If I go click on buy, it generates an email. And just to verify everything's working, for the demo, I'm actually storing the mail locally. So yes, the mail got stored. And this, remember, this file share is actually mapped to an Azure file share. So the data that you have here can now be used across different services as well. So quickly, let me head back to the deck. Now, so just to recap what you just saw, get your dependencies, migrate your app, use the modernization capabilities available on App Service as a platform, use storage mounts, use registry adapters, use familiar tools. So that's what RDP is for. Take advantage of platform scale and maintenance, and modernize and expand your application value with AI. Now, when I say AI, tomorrow we actually have a breakout session that's on your screen now, BRK150, where I will again have a much more deep dive demo on this, and I'll also demo how you can have a web API that's hosted on managed instance on App Service and then integrated as a part of agentic workflow. We also have a hands-on lab if you want to try out the demo that you saw. Lab 501, just head over, and we also have a blog talking about what we have announced today. With that, I'll hand over back to Jon to wrap up.
All right. Wow, that's a lot. So hopefully you've seen kind of the begin to end story there. You've got the simple case, right-click, modernize, and get it done quickly. You've got both the update and the modernize experiences there with GitHub Copilot. We've got an AKA link for you there to show that. And then also for those more advanced, more difficult cases, you've got App Service Managed Instance to kind of cover you on all bases there. So of course, we're always going to tell you about MS Learn. We've got a lot more information there going into depth on these things. And so we have like 2 minutes for Q&A, which I guess we can throw out. We're also going to be in the experts zone tomorrow morning.
There's an App Service expert booth as well. If you have questions, just walk in. We'll help you answer those.
I'm shocked. I thought we would go over it. Does anyone have a question they'd like to ask? No.
OK.
All right, then. OK. Thanks, everyone, for your time.
Thanks, everyone.
Okay.